Hello, fellow Rotarians. My name is Reed Miller, and I am your president of the Rotary Club of Portland. Welcome to our weekly membership meeting. I will now ask that you all join me in reciting the four-way test. You can do that on mute. Is it the truth? Number 2, is it fair to all concerned? Number 3, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And number 4, will it be beneficial to all concerned? All right, at this time, I'll ask any Rotarians who have invited a guest to please raise a hand so that we can introduce your guest to the club. If you're a visiting Rotarian who came on your own, please raise your hand and introduce yourself, or let us know you're here in the chat box.
Do we have any visitors? Or anybody who brought visitors? I don't see any hands raised.
All righty, thank you so much, Carol. And of course, thank you to all of our members for joining us here today for another Zoom meeting. Okay, Matthew Berry is a fantasy football writer at ESPN that I've been following for probably 15 years. Every year before the football season starts, and before each week of football, he puts out an article called Love Hate, which details which players he loves and which players he hates for the year, or for that particular week. I look forward to this article and I read it fairly religiously. Sure, I like fantasy football, but there's hundreds of similar pieces put out each week of the football season. And sure, it's probably good to get a little variety and hear what other pundits think, but it's not his picks that draw me to his articles. His love-hate piece is long-winded and always starts with a story or an experience that he thinks people can learn from. They typically have nothing to do with sports and everything to do with real-life learning experiences. What makes him so great is he then ties that learning experience into a perfect transition to his picks for the week. I guess what I'm getting at is it's the substance in the beginning of his articles that bring me back each week. Similar to me making an opening statement before we get to the business part of the Rotary meeting. I'll aim to do the same. This week, I'll leave you with a quick and to the point quote that Matthew Berry had in his season opening article. This resonated with me, and I hope it does for all of you as well. The quote is from the author Victoria Holt, who truthfully, I've never heard of. Never regret. If it's good, it's wonderful. If it's bad, it's experience. I would now like to welcome Rotarian Susan Cooksey, who will be presenting this week's reflection.
Hi there. Again, this is Susan Cooksey. I'm the new chair to organize the club members to deliver a 1-minute inspirational reflection at each meeting. I encourage our club membership to send me an email if you're interested in doing the 1-minute inspiration. When trying to find a meaningful topic for this week, I was struck with how wonderful it was to see some members at the Sentinel Hotel last week. Searching the internet, I found the Positivity blog and inspiration in the presentation, 10 things you can do when life sucks. I will read 3 of these. Number 2, tap into gratitude for the simplest things. When you feel like life sucks, it's easier to go from feeling sorry for yourself for a while into full-blown victim thinking that lasts too long. I find that zooming out a bit helps. Coming to Zoom meeting helps. So I ask myself, what are 3 simple things I can still be grateful for in my life? Remember, this is temporary. Just because this day or the last week didn't go well doesn't mean that there isn't a brand new day ahead. A day when you can find anew, take action and move towards what you want and have a bit more luck. Ask what's going well in your life. It's very easy to get stuck in focusing on negative things when your week isn't going well. But don't forget that there are still things that are going to go well in your life. It may be small things. This week has helped me to open up my mind and not get too focused on the things that aren't going well. So, Portland Rotarians, yes, our life during the pandemic really sucked. As a club, we are strong because of our members. I encourage everyone here to reach out to Rotarians that have not been seen on Zoom calls or at the Sentinel last week. Thank you. Invite them to come back to Rotary.
All right, thank you so much, Susan. That was wonderful. I really appreciate that reflection. If any of you are interested in giving a reflection in the future, you can reach out to Susan, who is in charge of scheduling reflections. Her email is twonavycaptains@gmail.com and will be dropped in the chat. All right, next, I would like to wish a happy birthday to our fellow Rotarians who have a birthday in the month of August. Please be sure to wish a happy birthday to all of our August birthdays. Please take note. Susan, happy birthday. And now I would like to introduce Rotarian Nihad Awida to remind everyone about our upcoming golf tournament. Welcome, Nihad.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good day. A couple of things. Just would like to announce our golf event for this year. And just a reminder, it is also on the website. You can register on the website without any problem or hesitation. If you have hesitation, just email me and I will register you. I'm user-friendly. This year, it's happening on September 9th, I believe, which is a Thursday. And it is going to be at Langdon Farms. Tea time is 1:30. Registration opens at 11:30. And the price is $135 per person. We also have a sponsorship available at starting from $275 and goes north from there. Would like to give a shout for Mr. Cole Mills. He decided to be a whole sponsor and he's bringing 3 teams. That's 12 people that are non-Rotarians. So, and if they like it, it will be, they will never regret it because it's a good experience. And if they hate it, it's also a good experience. And the class will also be always full. It's not half full, it's always full. The other half is full of air, like me, hot air. And also would like to give a shout to my beloved AJ Barnett. He is also bringing 3 teams. With all that said and done, you don't have to be a player or a golfer. Look at me, I'm from the desert and we don't have golf courses there. So please, it is open for all people. We are equal opportunity abusers. And if you don't have a team, I'll put you on a team. And if you have your own team, we would love to see your name on the registration form. Skylar and I will be able to answer any questions for you. So please don't wait for the last minute. So hopefully to see you soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Nihad. Always wonderful to hear from you. You always find a way to put a smile on my face. And my fellow Rotarians, I am pleased to have the opportunity to welcome a new member to the Rotary Club of Portland today. It is my honor to introduce Virginia Archer. Virginia, please take a minute or two to introduce yourself to the club. Here is Virginia.
Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me. Thanks, Reed, and thanks, Maria, who was my sponsor. I'm so excited to be plugging into this group because I'm new to Portland. I moved in December. My fiance's family lives up here. He's an architect in town, and I'm manager of donor relations at Catholic Charities. So I'm excited to get connected with some of the committees, maybe housing, maybe international service, but hopefully I can do a little bit of a rotation, just get to know Portland for you guys. But yeah, I'll put my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out. I would love to get coffee outside someplace or just have a Zoom meeting anytime. So thank you. Happy to be here.
All right, thank you so much, Virginia. I want you to know that we believe becoming a member of Rotary reflects how you conduct your personal and professional life. We all share your drive to give back, and I'm looking forward to you using your skills and your talents to make a difference in our community, as well as to connect with your fellow Rotarians. Everyone, please welcome your fellow Rotarian, the newest Rotarian in the world, Virginia Archer. All right, now it's time for our breakout room with a few fellow Rotarians. When you enter the breakout room, please introduce yourself to the others in the group. A minute before you come back to this main meeting, you'll get a notification that your breakout room will be ending in 60 seconds. As always, you're welcome to speak about whatever you'd like. I'm sure you'll have plenty of catching up to do with fellow Rotarians. If you need a topic of discussion, the topic will be regrets, or in other words, learning experiences. Okay, we'll see you back here in just a few minutes. Cole.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Glad to see everybody in the meeting. It was nice to do the breakout, get to catch up with everybody a little bit. But today I've got the pleasure of introducing an entire team of folks that are going to speak with us today from the Office of Violence Prevention. We're going to hear from a couple of folks. First off, I'd like to introduce Nike Green. Nike was born and raised in Portland. She's a proud alumnus of Roosevelt High School. Go Roosevelt. I live over in the St. John's. Nike is a graduate of George Fox University and with a master's in marriage and family therapy. She is currently a licensed marriage and family therapist and ministers alongside of her husband, Pastor Herman Green, at the Abundant Life PDX Church in North Portland. So welcome, Nike. Second, we have, and I just got to meet her a little bit more, Sierra Ellis on the call with us today. Sierra, we're almost going to call her a native. We talked about that in our breakout room, but Sierra moved to the Pacific Northwest about 11 years ago from the Midwest, where she was born and raised. She's raising 2 kids in the Portland metro area with her husband. With an environmental education background in science, she's found her passion in public service and serving the community. She has set out to make Portland a more vibrant, safer place to live, work, and play. Next, we have Erico Aiton, and I apologize if I said the last name wrong. My apologies, but Erico was born on the island of Saipan, but her family comes from the islands of Chuuk in the Federated States of Micronesia. Her family migrated to Oregon when she was a baby, and since then, Portland has been her home. Erico graduated from Reynolds High School. She is also a first-generation college graduate from Portland State University. You're going to get a clap from Scott Burns for that, where she received a bachelor's in social science. And the last person I'm going to introduce is Mustafa Washington, and I don't even really need to read his bio. Mustafa and I go back about 32 years. We grew up about a half a block from each other, and I think he beat me in crunch and basketball I think our lifetime record is like 212-3. But we played a lot of basketball together growing up. But Mustafa was born and raised in Portland. He's a graduate of Benson Tech, as am I, go Tech. And Mustafa received his bachelor's in science and business and his master's in science and management and organizational leadership from Warner Pacific University. This entire group is joining us today, like I said, from the Office of Violence and Prevention. The Office of Violence Prevention provides strategic direction and oversight for city efforts to reduce risk of violence through linked strategies in partnership with government, nonprofit, neighborhood, and faith organization. OVP's vision is that families and communities will be safer and more secure, supported, and healthy because of a coalition being actively involved in meaningful violence prevention efforts. And obviously, with everything going on in Portland right now, I think there's a lot to talk about, and I think that this group is going to give us a good insight as to what is going on from their perspective around what is going on in the city. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to, I think Erico is going to start the slideshow for us, but I'm going to pass the floor off. Welcome.
Thank you all so much. Number one, just for having us and inviting us to be in your space and to share with you, not just about the Office of Violence Prevention, but our lives. And you'll hear it intertwined in the why, the motivation behind what we do. It always matters. And research shows that if you want to lean in to connect individuals to a collective effort, it's the why that brings us together. What are we coming together for? And so everyone on our team is in this work for very personal reasons. And so my team, I'm very, very proud of what they do and how they do it every single day. So I'm the director of the Office of Violence Prevention. Sierra is our operations manager. And Mustafa, you'll hear from these in a few, as our program manager, and Erica works about 3 jobs, as many people would understand that. And she is our admin, our community engagement, as well as our communications, and carries multiple hats. But for the most part, what we would like to share with you today is about the Office of Violence Prevention. And to start off, before we just start talking about content and data, we want to take a pause. And this pause is modeling what for us is most important and central to this conversation, which is those that are impacted by gun violence. So we're going to take just 10 seconds to pause for at 8 a.m. this morning in my neighborhood, as well as Coles and a few others. There was a individual who was shot and killed. He has passed away now. So he was murdered right on the side of Delta Park Road, where there's a houseless camp. And so I just want to pause because somebody lost a brother, a father, an uncle. Someone's life was taken from them senselessly. So we'll take 10 seconds. Now I would ask you if you just would breathe in one big deep breath. And as you exhale, you think about the honor that each of us has today with the hours that we have in front of us, because we're still here. Yesterday is gone and tomorrow's not promised. And so with our hands and with our breath, with our eyes and our ears, we lean in to what great work that we can be a part of, that we can lean into. How can we touch lives in a different way? So the Office of Violence Prevention, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, which speaks to our why. Why do we do what we do? Well, we believe that in Portland specifically and across the nation, we know our communities of color are disproportionately impacted by violence, and we want to stop the bleeding. We want to be super active, not just in conversations and in meetings, but that we become the hands and the feet, the boots on the ground, those that are right there in those spaces of places of those that are continuously plagued by violence. So as you can see in this statement around our why, we hope that together, and now you are a part of that we can prevent gun violence, not just in the case of mass shootings, but also in the case of domestic violence, suicide, community violence, and violence involving law enforcement. And so we share this statement as the Prevention Institute has put out, that we know it's a collective effort. And we know that you now are part of that we by leaning in and listening today and the efforts that you are doing in a lot of the prevention. Next slide. So our office, a few ways we can categorize our office is we see gun violence as a public health issue. We want to stop the bleeding. To understand violence as a public health issue, what's good for you to understand is that means we know that it impacts everyone. We look at violence defined as a virus. That means it's both preventable and treatable, that we don't have to be pulled to one side of the narrative or the other, whether or not we are only going upstream and addressing root cause in education and social determinants and economic development, mental health and housing and all of these things. That's a yes, and it's also treatable, just like a virus. And so we have to stop the bleeding. We have to intervene. We have to interrupt, and we have to hold individuals accountable. And we can do that simultaneously. So we believe that we want to increase public safety. We want everyone to have a more family-friendly city. And we want to create safer communities. And so as you see in the graphic, we talk about community engagement and partnerships. That's one of our focus areas. Primary and secondary preventions, which is upstream and root causes. That's stopping the violence before it occurs. Secondary and tertiary prevention is more highest risk individuals and trying to reduce the long-term impact of trauma of those that have been directly impacted by gun violence, whether they're victims or offenders or very close near to proximity. And then we have program services of evaluation and accountability and the expansion of our partnerships. Next slide. So a little bit of the history in regards to our office. Just go ahead, next slide. the Office of Violence Prevention literally came out of back in 2005 specifically. The conversation started happening around what was happening in all the neighborhoods. And so I know this says 2006, but in 2005, there was an actual shooting that took place in downtown. And I don't know if how many of you guys remember back. Well, everybody's past 25. I'm just saying that. So there was a conversation with Mayor Vera Katz and also other city officials, that city leaders, leaders from the communities of color, as well as businesses were like, listen, there is too much violence happening in our town. We need to do something differently. And what's interesting about this is for us that have grown up in Portland, we know that 1987 was actually our worst year in gun violence, where there was about 70 homicides. So if you really think about collectively from the 80s, which was our worst years, there was nothing collectively done until 2006, where government finally said, maybe we should do something more intentional. So just think about like 10 years from the worst year, the city finally responded to the call of the community that says, you need to invest in long-term approaches in reducing gun violence. So in 2006, Mayor Tom Potter continued these conversations, and he established the Office of Violence Prevention. It was then called the Office of Youth Violence Prevention. John Kanda was the original director. After John Kanda, it was then Rob Ingram. Rob Ingram, unfortunately, an amazing gentleman, had lived experience, both him and John Kanda. He prematurely died of health reasons. And so then came in Antoinette Edwards. And what they were tasked to do was to identify community-based organizations that could do, outreach, get on the streets, work with really specifically gang-related individuals or affiliates, and really try to prevent violence from happening, doing a lot of upstream work, create pro-social activities, be on sites, provide things that can happen like teen night and excursions and different things for youth so that they could avoid conflict and they could de-escalate situations before violence occurred, working in conjunction with the park bureaus, community centers, as well as schools. And so that work continued. And then Antoinette, Miss Antoinette, as famously as she retired. And so literally I am the 4th director of the Office of Violence Prevention. What we are seeing now mimics the same cries of what we've seen then. The importance of lives being lost every single day. We're finding shootings. We've had 40 shootings in 1 week. We lost another life this morning. Everyone deserves better. Our kids, our elderly, our Black, our white, our Latinos, our Asians, our Pacific Islanders, our renters, our homeowners, our sick and our healthy, our able bodies and our disabled bodies. Everybody deserves to live in a city where they can feel safe. And those that are impacted even more, we have to pick up some of those pieces and find ways to help pivot their decisions and make sure that we hold them accountable. So our office is working very hard diligently. So like today, and unfortunately like this past weekend, when there's a shooting, our community-based organizations show up, whether that's at the crime scene or whether that's a hospital. But we also do prevention work, again, going upstream. And so in a minute, you're gonna hear more about our data, current gun violence, and what are some of the strategies that we use and the partners and the work that looks like. Next screen.
Thank you, Nike. I'm just going to be going over our office and our goals that we have. Our responsibilities is implementing strategies and initiatives to prevent, reduce, and end violence in Portland. OVP is particularly focused on addressing gun violence. We also work to create safer communities by promoting violence prevention citywide, partnering with community members, community-based organizations, the county, specifically Multnomah County, law enforcement agencies, city agencies, and those most impacted to develop and implement a collective community-led prevention plan. We also, as an office, invest in what works. Using data and research to inform our investments in violence prevention, we utilize evidence-based practices, cure violence, focused deterrence, hospital-based trauma one response, cognitive behavioral therapy, and other community-led efforts. To help continue strengthening our communities, we mobilize, support, and provide positive alternatives in communities to help boost resilience among residents impacted by violence. As Nike stated earlier, we view gun violence as a public health issue. Gun violence is a leading cause of premature death in the US. Guns kill more than 38,000 people and cause nearly 85,000 injuries each year. As a longtime advocate for violence prevention policies, American Public Health Association recognizes a comprehensive public health approach to addressing this growing crisis is necessary. Another note is social psychologists have also known for a long time that both attitudes and behaviors can spread rapidly within social groups and networks. And here we have a quote shared with Papa Christos, and I'll give a moment so people can read. All right. Hopefully that was a long enough moment. Thank you. And then going over to our data, our work is community and data driven. These are statistics these are data that we collected between January to July of 2021. Our shooting incidents as of July 21, it's 752 compared to 2020. My apologies. I have you guys covering the other side of 2020, the entire year of 891, comparing to shooting injuries, 245 of this year compared to last year, 215, and gun-related homicides are at 42 as of July 2021, and as of last year, it was at 41. So you can see the numbers side by side, and I can get more in depth with that. I have another slide to show you with the cost of violence. As you can see, this is broken up by year, cost per injury, number of injuries, and the total cost to the city based off of injury, shooting costs, and homicide cost.
Yeah, so I think this is where I chime in about emphasizing what this data means and how to really understand it. So if you go back one slide, we're talking about what is happening contextually in our city. Last year, as many of you guys recall, we were worried that that was the worst year in decades that we had seen going into 2020. We are now going into 2021, and we have already surpassed and will surpass last year. And we're on track, unfortunately, for this 2021 to be the worst year in homicides. Right now, we have gun-related homicides that are at 42. So we already passed last year. But all homicides, which is the 1987 data, we're at 58. So we unfortunately are going to surpass even our homicide data, which was 1987, where we had 70. So just a reminder of where we really are in regards to gun violence. Shooting injuries, that means individuals that have actually been shot. The entire year last year, we had 215. We're in August and we already have surpassed that number. And we know that our highest numbers usually happen in July, August, and September. And we saw an increase in November and December last year. So unfortunately, this number is not just passed, but it's still increasing of how many people are actually showing up with gunshot wounds. The shooting incidents, I just want to clarify, this is only reported shooting incidents. It is not reflective of the entire amount of shootings that have happened across the landscape of our Portland metro area. The next slide around the cost of violence, people always want to know, right? What are we paying out? Or why should we invest? Well, we just want to make sure you understand we are paying. This total cost is reflective of the crime scene, the police bureau, the hospital, the rehab, the nurses, the doctors, everything that takes place from the time an individual is shot all the way through rehab. So we right now, if you look at just the injuries, last year we paid out some way in some fashion or form $126.63 million. Well, that was last year. We're not even finished. And we've already paid out $150,000 for this year so far. So we are paying, and we're paying on the wrong side of these efforts. We want to make sure those total costs, because for our office, the investment that is made currently in our office to prevent violence, unfortunately, is only about 1.6 million. And that also includes our staffing. So we're limited on the amount of funding that we can go out the door so that we can prevent before it happens and reduce the trauma impact after it happens. Next slide. Well, we also pull some data around neighborhoods. Everyone kind of wants to know what's happening in my neighborhood. Where is it happening? And how can we focus our efforts in regards to where gun violence is happening, looking at crime prevention by environmental design, looking at those very strategic efforts that are focused neighborhood based. So Hazelwood has received, unfortunately, a lot of increase in shootings. You can see the numbers, but I want you to kind of reflect on those numbers of the amount of the shooting incidents and then the injuries. And so a lot of times we are not really aware of what's happening in our neighborhoods, but it is happening. And it's happening in our Hazelwood, Powellhurst, Gilbert, and Centennial. These are our East County neighborhoods are really seeing a huge impact. But I also want you to pay attention to St. John's as well as Park Rose. They may not be at the top there in as far as shooting incidents reported, but if you look at how many have been injured, 20 and 19, and even Montevilla 14, unfortunately, people are being injured by gun violence just equally, Hazelwood being the one. So if you're looking for different neighborhoods, there's other neighborhoods, obviously they're impacted by gun violence, but we took the top, I think this is 2, 4, 6, top 8 that we're seeing the most impact. And so literally it makes us question sometimes when we see certain efforts happening in certain neighborhoods and under the auspices of gun violence. And we're kind of going, maybe we should focus those investments and those efforts in those that are directly impacted and then spill out from there. Next slide.
So I just want everybody to I want to bring up what Nike mentioned earlier, preventable and treatable. Those words are very, very important, preventable and treatable. And that's what we try to do with our services and programs. Next slide. So the first program I'm going to talk about is our street level outreach program. This program is granted through our CBOs. And what it is they actually engage with people on the street. So we're talking about they could be riding around, see some kids that they are familiar with, start having those conversations. Hey, where are you going? How is it going? How's your family doing? Start picking their brain and seeing what's going on with them. But more importantly, being there for them. Do you need a ride? Because this area doesn't seem like the safest and you seem to have a reputation of XYZ, right? So how about you just hop in the car and I'll just take you to where you need to go? Or we're having, football camp today. Let's get you, I got like 10 other kids. Let's get together. We're gonna go to this field, have football. I have one individual takes kids out to archery. I didn't know anything about archery, but I learned a lot from an individual who that's what he does. He takes kids out to do things that are not necessarily common inner city things. And so you have archery and things of that nature. So they're really working with these kids, and it's usually in groups. Kids ranging from ages, I want to say 8 to 18 is really their primary focus, right? And that's preventable. That's that prevention piece. That's that trying to catch them early and working with them in transition. Right. Another thing that we have, and this is actually an in-office program, is our Restoration Academy. And what this is a transitional program. So this is for our community members who, made some bad decisions and maybe had to go and were incarcerated for some time. But they're getting out, they're trying to reinvent themselves, they're trying to do better. And so this is giving them an opportunity to own their skills, right? We figure out what those strong skill sets are and help them move for whatever they see planned for their life. So an example, we have one young lady, her big thing was domestic violence. She's a DV victim. And so that is her primary focus. She's working on that and trying to create a program within, hopefully, our office that is geared towards domestic violence. I have another individual, he has a passion and love for kids And so he's actually now transitioned. He went from being part of Restoration Academy. Now he's an intensive case manager for one of our community-based organizations, which is, don't get it, that's what we want, right? Because we're preparing them to take on that next step and get onto that job. So, and that's exactly what we wanted. So he was able to transition over. Another program that we deal with is the Trauma and Violence Impacted Families program. And trauma and violence impacted family kind of goes hand in hand with our hospital-based violence intervention program, which is called Healing Hurt People. So they kind of go hand in hand. So Healing Hurt People, what they do is, let's say we have a gun violence victim, he's been shot. Healing Hurt People, the goal is to respond within 4 hours, right? So they respond within 4 hours. Within that 4 hours, they will make those decisions and hopefully change their mind into doing something different. So they respond, and mind you, our Healing Hurt People person, he is a gun violence victim himself. So he knows what it feels like to lay in that hospital bed and you're just kind of sitting there and all you hear is machines and you hear doors closing. All the walls are white. For some people, it just, you know, it doesn't, they kind of get on edge. So he goes in there and he has those crucial conversations with them. You know, how are you doing? How can I help you? Have you thought about doing something different? Let's see what that looks like for you. Are you ready to do something different? Right. And then from that, you have your trauma, violence impacted families, and they work together. And what what they do is usually when there's a shooting scene, the family, let's say the person who shot and passed away, maybe they were the breadwinner for that family. And so trauma, violence impacted family comes in and helps them kind of navigate. And so that is just, you know, part of what that program does as well. We also have our community engagement partners that we work with, and we try to meet with them as frequently as possible. But that is our families of victims, our Moms to Men Action, our faith community, and again, our local CBOs and CPC, which I believe some of you guys do attend, as well as IPAC, which is a part of our faith community. Let's see, I gotta move my thing here. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so OVP Programs and Services. And here's what the big thing, this is what we do, okay? Screen up. So one of the things we educate and advocate. Oh, sorry about that. So we educate and advocate, educate elected officials, community, family, investors, business owners, in regards to gun violence, that it's a public health issue. So we want them to know that, and we want them to understand the impact of gun violence on our community and those best practices, and advocate for policy, laws and resources for our community to prevent and treat the impacts of gun violence. We invest in our community. We award grants to nonprofit organizations utilizing best practices to prevent gun violence. Again, we have our Restoration Academy. You know, that's us doing our part again there. But community mobilization, we convene community dialogues around gun violence and gun violence prevention and impacts and resources, education and advocacy. And next slide. Oh, that's it.
So, and we recognize we were trying to condense as much as we could, understanding the time, but we really wanted to give you a high level overview, also try to get to some of the weeds of things, but we appreciate your time, and just know that we are open for questions, but also always open, willing for a follow-up dialogue that are taking place. I do have to do a shameless plug real quick on behalf of Mustafa and Erica. We are having a back to school event on August 28th at the Cully Park, where we'll be handing out backpacks. DJ OG1 will be there playing music. making it family friendly, but making sure that our community knows that we're showing up in the spaces and places where we reside. And we want to make sure that they know we see them, we hear them, and we are there with them and alongside of them. So if you would like to show up, if you would like to bring your kiddos and grab items, or if you would like to donate through backpacks or any of those, definitely we accept all. So thank you. And now if there's any questions, I don't know if I'm giving it back to Reed or Cole or another Rotary. Oh, I see a.
So I'm hosting today, and we do have a question from Wesley Harper. Wesley, if you'd like to unmute. Wesley, are you there? You go.
Thanks so much for your presentation. I learned a lot. I'm on the Domestic Violence Solutions Committee of our Rotary Club, and I wondered if you could tell me the name of the person this is on domestic violence in your group.
So in our office, it's one of our interns who is working specifically with DV, because she is a survivor of domestic violence. So what I would like to do for that, Wesley, is I don't know who our contact was, but we can email you that with her permission. And so we can get that information to you. So I can't remember who the contact is, but we can get her email and name so that she can follow up with you. And her name is Ashley. Yes.
Thank you. Cole, you're next on the roster.
So I kind of have a two-part question. As somebody that grew up in, North Portland, went to Ockley Green in the 90s and the late 80s, and it was rough, and it was a different neighborhood then. How would you compare the violence that we're seeing today versus what was predominantly kind of known as gang violence, and much more hyper focused in that kind of northeast corridor of the city? Like, how would you compare the violence of today, gun violence of today, to the statistics of the 80s and 90s? And then just kind of a corollary to that, like, what is your guys' relationship with PPB, like with Portland Police, and how do you guys work with them? Because growing up in that time frame, like one of the big pushes was community policing and having a bit more of a neighborhood focused police effort, which seemed to really bear a lot of fruit back then. And it really did seem to kind of change the trajectory of some of that, northeast Portland violence back in the late 80s and 90s. So I just kind of wanted to hear how today's violence compares and what efforts you guys make with PPB.
Yes, thanks, Cole. I think there's a few ways to answer that. There's the data, right, which we've kind of already pointed out. We can look at the data and we can unfortunately speak to it's not just as bad, it's worse in regards to the number of shooting incidents, the number of shooting injuries and homicides. So we can do that comparison. The quantitative versus qualitative and real life experience, what we're seeing is there are levels of gang retaliatory shootings. We also see an increase of domestic violence, drug related and robberies. And so we're seeing a vast amount, but we also see the overlap, the intersection of these as well. And so I think some of the differences that I can say as a Portland individual growing up here who actually grew up in the Ville, where our both first two victims of gang violence lived, and I went to school with Ray Winston. We all knew Arthur Davis. The amazing thing is his son is actually the one that Mustafa is talking about. Full turnaround, was also a victim of gun violence, is now working. He works as an intern in our office and now has been hired on as a life coach, which is speaks volumes because his father was the second one murdered. And so one of the things that we see differently is through a lot of the gentrification and displacement, what was more neighborhood based in regards to a lot of the grouping gang retaliatory shootings back in the 80s and 90s now is across. I mean, our partnerships are vast. You're talking about from East County, Gresham, North Portland, and yes, even into Vancouver, as well as sometimes into Clackamas or Beaverton. So you don't really have this spatial focused effort as we used to, because you don't really claim a block or a neighborhood. There's components of that, but it's not like back then. Also, you don't see as much of the colors and the graffiti outside of our Latino gangs that you can see right now. We have a much larger, harder push, unfortunately, of our Latino gangs, the cartel, 18 streeters. Yes, it's real, and they are here in Portland, and they have put videos out that they're taking over this territory, taking over I-5. Please come and strap up. We also see new groups coming in that would be more like cliquish. And so we're seeing an increase in our, unfortunately, in our African immigrant communities. And then we're seeing a different type of violence coming out of some of our Pacific Islander communities. But I think with everything happening, even more so, it's so layered, right? You know, when we talk about gun violence, there's not one item. And I really want us to be very careful to think, we can think about the difference between causation versus correlation. And so there's so many things happening in Portland and nationwide that is attributed to our increase in gun violence. And that's contributed to, if we just talked about COVID, it's not just the virus, it's what happened when we shut down. And when we shut down, people lost jobs. We had service providers pulled away from the street in every single area, right? Not just police were pulled out, or probation and parole or law enforcement, but all of the prevention and positive activities in your schools and the structures. And then you get all those pulled aside, and then you have no money, and then you have no structures, and you have no accountability. It's just layer upon a layer upon layer. And then you look at our neighborhoods, and unfortunately, they are not representative of safe spaces and healthy spaces. So all of these things are playing. And then we have this national narrative that said, guess what? Picking up a gun is actually an option on how to solve conflict. And that has plagued us. That now we believe that instead of having a conversation first, or looking at de-escalation, or trying to find different ways to resolve conflict, we've actually put a gun on the table as a viable option to resolve conflict as one of the first options. So there's all those things that we are all challenged with. I know, and I don't know the time, so I know, Carol, you're jumping in, and I apologize because we could talk about this forever, and I didn't get to your other question. Sorry, Carol.
I was just going to say we could have another whole meeting here, but I do know that Jim, Dick, and Angel all had questions. I was going to call on Angel next, but Reed, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can decide what we're going to do with these three individuals.
I appreciate that, Carol. I would love to get all the questions in, and it's been wonderful hearing from all of you and everything that you guys do. I appreciate that. We don't have any more time. We got to stick to our schedule here and respect everybody else's schedules. Everybody has other things going on with their day, and I want to make sure to respect that. But I do want to say thank you so much to Erico, Nike, Sierra, and Mustafa for all of the incredible work that you do in the community. Thank you to each of you for taking the time today to speak to our club and educate us on what's happening out there and what's being done to prevent it. You all are more than welcome to come back and join us anytime as a guest or even as a new member. All right, next week we will be meeting right here back on Zoom at noon on Tuesday, August 24th. I do, however, want to remind everyone that our next in-person meeting will be on September 7th at noon at the Sentinel Hotel. Registration is required to attend, so please register on our website, rotarypdx.org. Please don't forget, if you have a speaker idea, please reach out to Dev Dion, who is the chair of the program committee. We are always looking for great program ideas, and our programs depend on our members being proactive. All right, no guests today, but thanks again to our speakers for joining us. And thank you for speaking to us about the work that you do at the Office of Violence Prevention. Susan, thank you so much for your thoughtful reflection. I'd also like to thank everybody behind the scenes that help our programs run so smoothly. Thank you to Angel, thank you to Skylar, and thank you to Corinne. Most importantly, thank you to all of our committee chairs and to our members for all that you do for our club. As we close today's meeting, let's all remember why we are here. We serve to change lives. Let's continue to focus on the lives that we change and continue to step up and do the right thing. Thanks again for joining.